Thank you very much. Really appreciate the time. We have our work cut out for us in the sense that we've got a tighter time, but I think the conversation that we're about to have around transport and facilitation is one that is incredibly important. So I'm going to start off by inviting Deputy Minister to first respond to these questions. In an earlier conversation with Deputy Minister, as I was standing behind him in the lunch queue, we discovered that both our parents come from the very same city in South Africa, the city of Pietermaritzburg. And I'm reminded, Deputy Minister, of the provocation that was shared by Dr. Amonia earlier today, that here we are in Abidjan, connected because the world we find ourselves in is so much more deeply connected. The conversation and the question that I want to put to you as we kick off is to ask you to talk to us about the South Corridor, the Beira Development Corridor, and in particular, the extent to which you're starting to see the benefits of trade, you're starting to see the benefits in terms of agriculture, and perhaps a comment on what you're seeing in terms of the spillover effects or the outcomes and the benefits on industrialization.
Thank you so much. I'd like to appreciate our host, Africa Development Bank, for hosting us in this beautiful country of Cote d'Ivoire. Coming from Zimbabwe, we as a nation are very excited about what is happening under the Second Republic in Zimbabwe, led by His Excellency the President, Dr. E.D. Mnangagwa. And a lot of infrastructure development has been happening recently. If you look, you take into example the North-South corridor that we talk about, where we've had an upgrade of the Beitbridge border post. We've had work on the Beitbridge to Harare Road, and we are now commencing work on Harare to Chirundu to allow the access from Beitbridge all the way through to the north to allow access into Zambia and beyond. We have the Beira corridor, which my dear brother next to me, the Permanent Secretary from Mozambique, where we're working on infrastructure that will stretch from Beira, our railway network from Beira into Mutare, into Harare, to allow us to move freight from the roads onto rail. We are looking at the link between Kafue in Zambia and Lion's Den, because all of this comes together with the issue of regional integration, the promotion of trade for countries, for us to trade amongst ourselves. We are also looking at an initiative where in July, the Ministers of Transport from Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and Botswana signed an MOU to develop rail from Mozambique, from a new port being built there, to Zimbabwe into Botswana, a project worth 6.5 million, where we are looking towards the Africa Development Bank to assist with technical assistance, financial assistance, to do a feasibility study, but ultimately to allow us to trade amongst ourselves from Botswana, Zimbabwe into Mozambique. This will result in minerals being transported, agriculture being promoted, the special economic zones you referred to. So this is also a very exciting corridor for us from the west, Botswana, into Zimbabwe, all the way to Mozambique. So some of these initiatives are really bearing fruit for us. And what I believe is most important is to promote intra-African trade, where we move resources from one country to another, ultimately to achieve value addition so that we can do it within our African countries, but really to grow our economies and our GDP.
Deputy Minister, I think, I wanted to ask you what role you would see for an institution like the African Development Bank, but you've already indicated that there's a financial role to play, there's a technical role to play, there's support in terms of feasibility studies. So that's been outlined. What I'm keen to hear from you is, what do you think is going to change once all of this is done? I mean, you've mentioned trade, you've mentioned agriculture, but I'm certain that you've quantified the opportunity. And what will Zimbabwe look like once this project is completed in comparison to the Zimbabwe we know now?
Well, we are looking at cross-cutting across the economy. We're looking at our road networks. We're looking at upgrading our railway systems from Hwange in the west to Kuala to the Maputo port. We're looking at upgrading our airports, which we have done successfully. The Harare International Airport, the RGM Airport, has been upgraded, as well as the Victoria Falls Airport. So the air, we're looking at aviation as well, promotion of aviation. So your roads, your rail, your air transport. But ultimately, the bank can and should come on board as well, where we're talking about value addition.
Yeah.
And value addition can only be done where we as countries take a conscious decision to take our raw materials and turn them into products, and not have a situation where we just export raw materials and re-import the finished products. So I believe Africa Development Bank can really come on board as well to look at value addition initiatives, how we can develop such infrastructure so that we trade amongst ourselves. It was mentioned earlier that rail in Africa contributes to less than 1% of carriage of goods. And yet this is because what has been designed in the past is an extractive mode where we have infrastructure to the ports so that we can export our raw materials. Mention was being done about the airlines not cooperating amongst ourselves. So I believe the bank can really go a step further in identifying how we as African nations can trade amongst ourselves as we are entering into the continental free trade area. How do we trade amongst ourselves, but how do we ultimately do value addition on our products and trade in finished products as well?
Deputy Minister, thank you very much. And I think the clarity there is so crystal, because what you're saying is part of that support is value addition, assuming that there's value that's been identified to start off with, because you only add onto a value base, but also the point you make about the emphasis on the how. We know what needs to be done.
Sure.
We need support in enabling the how. Let me build on that by going to Permanent Secretary Situ. Permanent Secretary, when we look at Mozambique, there are a range of oil and gas projects in Mozambique that are contributing to an increased demand for transport and trade facilitation. There's the growth of neighboring countries that is also driving the transportation sector in Mozambique. The question to you, PERMSEC, is what new trade opportunities are you seeing opening up in Mozambique because of the growth in the transport sector?
I want to thank for having this invitation to be part of this good panel to talk about all those issues. I want to apologize first if my English is not good enough. I will not change to French because I have to think on my mother tongue, then translate to Portuguese, then to English. So French, maybe it will be the fourth one. So I want to apologize on that. But I want to thank you and try to update what we are doing in Mozambique and which are the opportunities that we are seeing. Mozambique is strategic, well located in terms of logistic chain. It's a gateway for many interland countries, and as a gateway, we do need to do our best in order that all the logistic can become more sustainable, efficient for us and for others that they have to use those corridors in Mozambique. That's why in 2009 we designed a strategy that we call the Strategy for Integrated System of Transport, that they do have two big pillars. The first pillar is to develop the infrastructures in order to answer the national and regional demand. And the second one, it is those infrastructure must be efficient and competitive. But how are we gonna do this in terms of developing infrastructures, as we know that we all have the shortage of finance, and that's why we're seeking the finance of the African Development Bank and other players. We start to go on the Spatial Development Initiative, where we do scope all the potential that we do have in the country, in the region, in order to see which are the anchor projects that we can do have in order that it can make viable the construction of those infrastructures. That's why you mentioned about the gas field. The gas field is located on the North region in Cabo Delgado. It's not really much linked to the main corridors. I'm talking about the Maputo corridor that is going to South Africa, Eswatini, and Zimbabwe. But I'm talking also about Beira corridor that is going to Zimbabwe, Malawi, Zambia, and DRC. I'm talking about Nakala corridor that is going to Malawi, Zambia, and DRC. So the gas field, it will do increase the GDP for the country, yes. It will do increase some opportunity in terms of infrastructures in Cabo Delgado province, but it will not affect much on those corridors. That's why we still need to look on the best strategies on those corridors.
Yeah.
That's why when you look on those corridors, you'll see that in terms of the first pillar to develop infrastructures, we are doing our best. When you look on Beira corridor that you mentioned before, when you ask my colleague of the panel, we do rehabilitate and modernize the 317 kilometers of the rail line from Beira port to the border. But we are sure that a corridor to become efficient is not by having only a good infrastructure. We do need to be clear about all the logistics chain, either at the port, the feeders, rail or road, the border, all those integrated, we need to have it clear and to put it in a good conditions in order that we can go for digitalizations to enable this and sustainable corridor to be used.
Yeah.
When we talk about the border, that's why we are coming to see if this border first must come up as a one-stop border post. Then it can come as a smart border. Because if it's not even yet a one-stop border, when you start to think about smart border, you are lying to yourself because you don't know even clear the process that you need to integrate among different countries. For that purpose, when we look on the Maputo corridor, we are doubling the line that is going to South Africa in terms of the line. On the road also, we do upgrade the road, but in the border, we start to go for the paperless.
Yeah.
Based on that, only by doing this paperless, we were used to have around 800 trucks per day, but when we come up to paperless, we increase the trucks to around 1,500 trucks per day to 2,000 trucks per day. We are sure that the main idea, it was not to increase the trucks on the road, because if the cargo is really traditionally for train or for the rail cargo, it's supposed to go to the rail. But we as the Minister of Transport and Communication, we do promote all the main of transport, and the cargo must go to a better logistic chain. If the rail, it is enabling the best results, the cargo will shift themselves to the rail.
Yeah.
That's why we are doing our best on the border, either on the road side, either on the rail side. We start to have the seamless trains with South Africa to try to push the trains from the point of origin of the cargo directly to the port. These, it reduces the time at the border, and then by doing this, it reduces the cost also. We do have the challenges of the rolling stocks, but the Africa Development Bank is helping us.
Pamsek, I'm sorry to jump in. I think as I'm listening to your response, I think there's so much that you've shared, but one of the things I want to double click on, because I think it's so powerful, is that you've said to us, think about the process of digitization. You've spoken about how you focused on moving from paperless to automated first before you go into deeper, more deeply integrated technology. What's next? Now that you've achieved paperless, what is the government planning to do or looking to do to take it one step further after paperless? If you're seeing 1,500, 2,000 trucks a day, what do you think the next level of technology integration at the borders is going to achieve?
Thank you. First, how it will be achieved and what we will do have on that. First, because we do have the paperless on the Mozambican side, but we're supposed to have a one-stop. So now we need to go for one-stop. By having one stop, it will do increase much the number of trucks per day. The turnaround will do reduce, and then it will enable that the port will do receive much cargo in short time, and we can do handle more and more and more, and service will be done. But apart of that, by having one stop, we are discussing, and we do have an action plan, at least, as I mentioned, start with South Africa, and then we are discussing with Zimbabwe also to go on the same road, to have this digitalized system and communication among the system from Mozambique and South Africa. By having that, it will be clear that for many transit cargo, the trucks or the truck drivers will not need even to stop and come down. It's only to confirm that we are talking about the same guy, and then by doing this also will do increase much. We are sure that it can even double that.
Yeah.
As I do mention, we are not promoting the road transport. We are promoting all the means of transport. That's why at the same time, we are doing on the rail side, we are increasing the rolling stocks on the rail side, we are increasing, we are digitalizing the process, we are scanning and checking, controlling from the start point to the port on the rail side. So we are sure that at the end of the day, these will do increase the volume of cargo that will be transported either on the road, either on the rail, and those, it will enable us that the corridor must be transformed as a developmental corridor, not a transport corridor, because we don't want that our rail and road only it's for transit. We are doing all this to create an environment in which we need to industrialize all the roads where we do have the rail or the road, because we do have all the resources that we can do that.
Permsec, thank you very much. I think that's absolutely powerful. One of the sound bites I love from what you've shared is that we're not talking about transport corridors. We're talking about the opportunity to transform development corridors. And I think that's a really powerful provocation. And what you're also saying is that we need to be thinking about transport infrastructure in a very integrated way of thinking about the broader value chain. So let me go to Mr. Diane. Mr. Diane, to first start off by apologizing by calling you Madame earlier on. Mr. Mori Diane, my apologies are registered in the room. Mr. Diane, I want us to build on some of the things that Permsec has put on the table. Because if one goes to your website, these are the words that you use. You say, our vision is that we realize an optimized, simplified, and secure movement of goods and people between African countries. It feels like an incredible way of summing up why we're here. With that in mind, when you scan the technological innovations that are available, what's exciting you? And I'm wanting to hear about innovations that take us beyond just the one-stop shop, beyond just being paperless, but really get us to the next level of technology that facilitates trade. What's exciting for you right now?
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to thank the African Development Bank for this great opportunity to address a subject that is really very important to us, and I believe to the whole continent. And I must say that it was so refreshing to hear the minister from Mozambique. Actually, when I heard him and when I was listening to him, it felt like I was making the case myself. Usually when I hear about connectivity in Africa, the emphasis is on ports, airports, and sometimes corridors. Very seldom borders are mentioned. But one has to really look at the fact 80 to 90% of the African population travel through borders, land borders. We heard from airline industries, 5–10% only of African people travel by air. So we're talking about how we treat ourselves, traveling from one country to the next. So we really have to look at this fact. It's very, very important. Before talking about innovation, technology, we need to dream for ourselves, to provide the best services to our own people, our moms, our dads, our brothers and sisters that are crossing the borders every day. So before even talking about innovation, let's talk about basic things. Have buildings to house agents that works at the border. Have buildings to be able to host users at the borders. We have to have the basic infrastructure. Thanks to the African Development Bank, there is a great emphasis on developing corridors now across Africa. We, as a company, Scanning Systems, we have dedicated our work to providing the best service at borders. Same level of service as in any given airport in Africa. Meaning, provide great customer experience for immigration. Provides seamless, with no delay, service to cargo going from one country to the next. So the first thing we did was crawl first. Build an infrastructure at the border, house people that are working at that border, provide them with the basic equipment that they need, computers. Provide them with electricity. Usually at our borders, electricity is not readily available, so you may need to put in strong generators and so forth. Provide them with telecommunication means. Provide them with training to be able to use the latest technologies. And then we move on to what do we require to make it work well. First thing is, there is so much redundancy in terms of traveling from one country to the next, either for cargo or people. It was to think of re-engineering the process. Before you digitalize, you have to frame it in such a way that it will fit into the best international standards. So put all that into perspective, talking to various countries, and then create a software, which we've done. We've created a software called the e-Joint Border Post, which is basically a single window scheme, whereby all the information is collected at one single point of collection, and then disseminated to all stakeholders working at that border. So there is no delays, there is no redundancy, and so forth. And then when you go beyond that, of course, there are so many innovations out there. I will talk about the SIGMAT, for example, that ECOWAS is pushing through funding through the World Bank, I believe, which allows merchandises in transit to be able to cross a border for in about 30 minutes, just because the sharing the information between the two custom agencies involved in treating that particular product. That's one. You have Afreximbank that is trying this new system that they call the African Collaborative Guarantee Scheme. What you need to understand is that when a truck leaves, for example, Lomé, they have to get a guarantee for the leg from Lomé to the border. When they get to the border, they have to get another guarantee from the country in which they're entering. This collaborative scheme is to provide a platform to be able to get one single guarantee across the whole region. So it's been on trial in East Africa. We're hoping that we'll be able to try the same thing in West Africa. So there is so much to be done, but I insist we have to start with the basics before we go to the next level.
So, Mr. Diane, you took my second question out of my mouth, because I had wanted to ask you, how do you benchmark in terms of what is good and what is high quality? And it was so fascinating to me that the examples you brought to the surface are from Africa. And oftentimes when we begin to talk benchmarking, we start to look outside of the continent and start looking at technologies in other regions, in Europe and Asia and so on. And it's really encouraging to know that there's best practice on the continent. I do want to underscore one other thing that I thought was really powerful. And it might seem slightly like it's semantics, but I think it's important that the call to action is how we build is a reflection of how we treat ourselves. and that how we build is a reflection of how we dream for ourselves. And I think, if anything, those are certainly words that we're going to have to take away from this conversation. So let me then build on some of the comments that you've made, and I want to go to Mr. Cohen. Mr. Cohen, I want us to maybe focus on Beitbridge. And the way the Beitbridge port in particular, which of course we know has been a complex project, a multifaceted project, the way that I have the questions is that at this point we're supposed to talk about challenges. I don't want to do that. What I'd like to talk about instead is that, given that this is now generally perceived to be a successful project, how did you go about measuring success? As you were thinking about what good looks like, what were the metrics you had in place as Beitbridge Port was being developed, being refined, being improved over time?
How we look at success is exactly what we achieved. If you look at Beitbridge before we did the modernization project, it was congested. Trucks were taking 6 days. The user experience was terrible. Massive crime, with queues of trucks waiting. It creates all sorts of challenges. What we have today is we have a streamlined situation where the user experience for passengers is very much like an airport, like Mr. Diano was explaining. We have state-of-the-art hard infrastructure facilities. We integrate that with ICT that helps the process of the goods. From 6 days now, it takes from 20 minutes to 3 hours for commercial cargo to go through. We're introducing fast lanes, like the PS of Mozambique was saying, where maybe the driver doesn't even need to exit his truck. It will be like he arrives at a toll booth. The ICT, the AI will process everything, the information sharing between where the truck came from, where it's going to, and where it stops is all shared. And we can actually track that truck. We can ensure that we stop things like transit fraud, which is a huge problem in the region, and it creates huge losses to the fiscus, human trafficking. So we measure success in those terms. Also, in terms of building out Beitbridge, we measured success that we finished the project before time and we completed it on budget. So I hope that answers the question.
Ladies and gentlemen, it sounds like a really impressive brag list, Mr. Cohen, as you talk about streamlined from 3 hours to 20 minutes, fast lanes, information sharing, reduced transit fraud, finished before time, on budget, and it really is incredible and speaks to what is possible. Maybe as a follow-up, Mr. Cohen, if you were to lift 3 lessons that, if we could use these lessons as we try to replicate what's been done at Beitbridge Port, what were the 3 lessons that you would share with the room? 3 things that really were a make or break, made a difference in all of the things that you've listed as success factors?
Well, the most important thing, in terms of the physical infrastructure that we did at Beitbridge was traffic separation. In conjunction with the ICT and the AI, all of the systems, they need to be harmonized, which is very important. We talked about single window just now, which is going to be very, very, very important. There are multiple agencies at all these borders, from 6 agencies to 13 agencies. And if that's reduced into a single window, it streamlines the effects considerably. Getting buy-in and the trust from all stakeholders is very important. Buy-in from private sector with government, buy-in from the users, the commercial transporters, the passengers, and the operators. So those are very important lessons.
Mr. Cohen, thank you very much. I want to be cheeky and maybe make the following comment, is that on the point of buy-in and securing buy-in, I think that's so critically important, because sometimes when a system is dysfunctional, we can make the mistake of thinking that no one benefits. Those who benefit from dysfunctionality have a vested interest in ensuring that those systems remain dysfunctional. And so when you can count buy-in as one of the things that we've gotten right, it's an incredibly important point, because it's not just about securing the buy-in of the people who want the system to work, but it's also convincing those who have a vested interest in it not working. So thank you very much. Did you want to comment on that, Mr. Cohen?
Yes, I mean, that is a serious challenge, and you know, in the whole region, the people that you mentioned are a major challenge, and it's to ensure that they become compliant with the border systems. And just one other correction, we improved the traffic flow from 6 days to 3 hours.
Okay, fantastic. But we're going to get to 20 minutes, Mr. Cohen. Then yes, you can give him a round of applause. I think that's absolutely fantastic. Madam Anthony, let me come to you. Again, I want to go to your website. I love going onto the websites of these organizations to see the promises they make on the website and how these translate into the actual work. So your website says, our mission as Trademark Africa is to grow prosperity through increased trade, which I think is such a beautiful mission and very well articulated. So how do you do that? In particular, how do you do that by bringing technology closer to trade? I'm looking for 1 or 2 examples of how you've taken technology, taken trade, converged the two, and have come out with a mission, a step closer to your mission of growing prosperity through trade.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. It's a pleasure to be here. Just for those who don't know, Trademark Africa is a not-for-profit, an African not-for-profit, aid for trade outlet, been in business for 14 years. When we started 14 years ago, we felt like a lonely prophet in the desert. And now when I hear my colleagues in the panel, it feels like music to my ears. It's like it's now part of the narrative in the trade space, in the transport space, to make regional integration happen, to make prosperity happen, to better. So thank you, and I really like your sharp questions. They're fantastic. So what we do, over the last 14 years, we've built what I would say an ecosystem of trust. It means you invest in infrastructure, what I hear, ports, borders, dry ports, but you also build in the processes and the digital processes. Now, this has made incredible gains in the East African region where we started, especially with the EAC. And I'm really proud when somebody says that that's the benchmark. Yeah. That was really fantastic. And this is why we're now Trademark Africa, working in the Horn, and now here in West Africa, well, and hopefully more with Mozambique as well. But so that one example you're asking, let me just get some figures because, so what we've done, for example, in Uganda, there were so many trade processes, very inefficient. We've started from customs. We've gathered all the other trade agencies around it to create a public single window. Now, so we're blessed with a lot of grant money, so we don't need the private sector to come in. And in some sovereign assets, that might actually be quite important because you're dealing with government revenue, with security, with immigration. It's sensitive. So this single window, it was one of its first kinds in Africa. So now everybody talks about single windows as if it's nothing. But at the time, as Ankta said, most trade transactions involve 30 parties, 40 documents, 200 data elements, and they require re-encoding of 70% of all data at least once. Now, if you can reduce that and put that in one place, that's where you get the gains. So over the years, with these 20 agencies in Uganda, we've been able to reduce the cost of clearing goods by 25 million in 1 year, the cost to the country. Now, that takes average clearance time down, from over 9 days to less than 2. So it's like similar what you hear in the panel, and the cost of each transaction reduced to half. Now that's important because that's what makes the difference.
Yeah.
If you allow me, you were talking about prosperity.
Yes.
Waiting times can be measured in dollars. We've calculated that 24 hours waiting time is a cost for one truck of $210. Now, I think some of my colleagues were talking about, say, 800 trucks a day, say 1,000. A daily extra cost to the economy is then, give or take, $200,000.
Sure.
On a year, what does that mean? We're talking about $60 million into the economy of extra cost. Now, that's not the transporter that pays it. The cost goes to the consumer.
Yeah.
It means your mom, my husband, when they go shopping, they pay that price. And so we're not only talking about traders and government, we're talking about family budgets.
Yeah.
We're talking about consumer goods that really can reduce their cost if logistics are far more efficient.
Thank you very much. You know, one of the things you've raised, and I'm going to bring it into the second panel, which is going to come up in the next 2 minutes, is the cost on households. And that's because we're going to be talking about agricultural value chains. And I think that's the cost of food becomes a real conversation. But just a quick comment on ecosystems. You're the first person who's mentioned ecosystems in this conversation, although we've heard it in the room. But you talk about an ecosystem of trust.
Yeah.
2 things, maximum 3, that make ecosystems work.
It is what happens, for example, here in Côte d'Ivoire really well. You talk about compliance, not punishing. It means if a trader makes a mistake, what do you do as a customs officer? You punish him, or you say, let's sit together and make sure you understand. We go as far with you as possible. We sit with you, you understand our systems. Now, then if you default, then you pay the fine.
Yeah.
But that creating a trust is communication, is sitting together, is stakeholder engagement. It's between traders and the agencies. It's among agencies in a country. Do the customs talk to the standard people? And it's between, and we heard it in the panel, it's between countries, cross-border.
Yeah.
A few weeks ago, we organized the Ghanaians and Ghanaian and the Ivorian customs people to sit together. The systems are not communicating. They both use SIGMET. I think my colleague was talking about SIGMET. It's not working. They don't exchange data. Sit together, create that trust. And that takes a lot of soft power.
Yeah.
It takes sitting together, creating amicable relations between nations, between agencies. It's a lot of work. It's worth a while.
It's a lot of work, but certainly worth doing. Compliance, communication, and soft power. That's a term I haven't heard in the room up until this point. Now, I want to wrap up, but I know that Deputy Minister says that he's got a 30-second gratitude that he wants to extend. Go ahead, Deputy Minister.
Thank you, Madam Shabalala. It would be remiss for me to leave without saying these words. In 2019, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Malawi were hit by a devastating cyclone Idai, which damaged infrastructure, roads, your bridges, and led to loss of life. In our case in Zimbabwe, more than 600 people lost their lives. At this point, our president, Dr. E.D. Mnangagwa, put out an appeal for assistance, and Africa Development Bank came forward. It's very emotional for me because I come from Chimanimani in the eastern district of Zimbabwe, where we were hardest hit by the cyclone, where we lost roads and bridges and schools and clinics. But Africa Development Bank came forward and worked with the UN agency, UNOPS, to restore our roads, our bridges, and really build back better. We had a road that was built from Machongwe to Risitu Mission, which has opened up even what we didn't have before the cyclone. Farmers have benefited, carrying their perishable product to market, accessing medical facilities. And really, I felt it was important for me to say these words, to thank you, Africa Development Bank. I can see our Vice President sitting here with your team. That intervention really has gone a long way. And it's such interventions that make your existence really important. I would like to thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before we give them a final round of applause, allow me just to throw these sound bites at you. We need to remind ourselves that we can crawl first before we walk and run. We need to dream better for ourselves. And we need to remind ourselves that that which we build is a reflection of how we want to treat ourselves. Allow me to also remind you that once we were loners in the desert, and now all we hear is music to our ears. The most important conversation is how everything actually impacts the family budget at a household level. A very big thank you to my panelists, please. Let's give them a big round of applause. Thank you so much.